Hey everyone, welcome to the Smiling Homeschooler podcast. We're glad you can join us. Before we get started here, we're going to be talking actually about fear and facing our fears and the fears that every mom and dad and parent out there is deals with. So I think it's going to be a really good conversation. But before we start, we do want to say thank you to Teaching Textbooks for helping make the Smiling Homeschooler possible. They're an amazing math curriculum and the curriculum that we use, and we've recommended to thousands of other homeschoolers because it's just amazing. So if you haven't checked them out already, you definitely should over at teachingtextbooks.com. We really appreciate their support. Also, thank you to Samaritan Ministries. They're a community of Christians that help pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading in career or in ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more over at samaritanministries.org. And we have a code you can use, which is down. I'll put it in the description and also in the comments, so you can check it out there. But Dad, if you're ready, go ahead and get started. Let's go.
We are. I feel like we have got to get moving quickly because, we are like on December the 2nd as we record this. So we are like on this race to Christmas, and there's no way there's only 23 more days. We just had Valentine's. We just had Thanksgiving, and it's just impossible. It's impossible. So it feels like it's kind of compressed into this quick and short time. So we want to make the most of it. We're going to talk about some of the Christmas things that we have to offer. But before we get going down that path, I just thought maybe I'd ask Ben some questions. Maybe you can answer them too, Mom. So this is the lightning round, Ben. So don't think about it too long. You've already probably said some of these, but favorite Christmas movie?
Home Alone.
Okay. Favorite Christmas snack food?
That's a hard one. I don't necessarily know if I have one that like super jumps out. I guess at Grammy and Granddad's we used to have one of my aunts would make the Ritz covered mint chocolate Ritz crackers or whatever they are. It's like you take a Ritz cracker and cover it in chocolate and mint and dip it kind of deal. It's really good.
That wouldn't even be my top 5.
I don't know. I kind of panicked.
Favorite Christmas song?
The Christmas song, Nat King Cole.
And if you say Santa Baby or Last Christmas, no. I'm hanging up right now.
Nat King Cole's Christmas song, right? That's what it's called.
Okay. I think it is called that. Your favorite Christmas activity or tradition?
Other than just, being with family and that's like become my, as you get older, it's really just the time to be able to just relax and on Christmas Eve with people or Christmas Day. But outside of that, it's always fun. We call it sleeping down on the Christmas tree. We watch Polar Express now and we all sleep down in the living room around our Christmas tree roughly or on the couches and stuff like that. And that's always a highlight. So I think that's probably still my favorite at the moment with the kids and they love it. So definitely fun.
And it's cool for a dad to watch his son, who's a dad, do some of the same traditions. Mm-hmm. I stole that tradition from another dad, 30 some years ago, when he said, one of my son and I, we like one of our favorite activities, he said, is to lay under the Christmas tree and look up through its branches. Yeah. And so I took that as sleeping around the Christmas tree. And I just thought it's something we've always done, and it's fun to see your kids do it as well. But, one of the things that we do at our house is we're getting ready. Tomorrow will be our first Advent night at our house. And it's kind of a loose invitation to those who want to be a part of it. Not everybody comes, and that's okay because it's kind of hectic when everybody does. And we've done them for as long as we've slept around the Christmas tree. And we... of course, we light an Advent candle, which is kind of loose now as it goes. They fight over who gets to light that candle because, you can't light a candle every other day of the year, 50 times a day if you don't want to.
19-year-old gets to argue with a 4-year-old nephew about it. So that's great.
Well, I get to blow it out. If you get a lot, you lit it last year. And so, yes, we go through all that. Then we read some scripture. We do a little craft. And we always close with praying and sparkling grape juice and a cookie shaped like a Christmas tree, or even better, Little Debbie's.
Yeah, those might actually be the best snack.
They are.
Oh, hugs. I'd pick hugs.
Yeah. So we'll make hugs one time. We might do sugar cookies. Tomorrow we got a special craft going. But at some point, we'll read one of our Christmas stories. And because years ago I wanted to have some stories that were still enchanting, that give you those little Christmas goosebumps, but didn't confuse myth with truth. Like someone doesn't die and then become an angel, or there aren't baby angels, or I didn't like those. But I still like the goosebumps. And so we wrote our own, and our very first one was called Cootie McKay's Nativity.
That was your first one.
Yeah, that was my first one.
I thought a Catherine Snow Village or something was earlier than that.
Nope, it was not. Now, I may have toyed with one of the other ones, like A Bishop's Dream. That may have been first, or The Stranger.
Yeah, I remember Stranger way before.
But one by one, we added them. We offered them separately until we put them all together in the Family Man's Christmas Treasury. And they have become traditions for lots of people. I shipped out probably a dozen of them today. And, I was thinking about them kind of maybe as a lead into what we're going to talk about. Not so much fear, because fear is something very specific. But I think there's a difference sometimes. These stories not only point us all to the manger, to the real meaning of Christmas, to Jesus, but there's also a point that maybe it's just Christmas. It reminds us of what really matters. Because I was just talking about it a few minutes ago, right before we started. And sometimes I forget what matters. Sometimes I get caught up in, not having very shiny cars, or having very rusty cars, or cars that don't work, or, even my kids, Cal took his car in and they said it's $1,000 hose because they have to take off the turbocharger, and it stresses me out. And I'm like, oh, why can't we just pay it for them, or maybe it's something else. And it's stories like, one that we have as a PDF. You can get it on the Kindle. It's called The Last Christmas, about a dad who is told by an angel that this is his last Christmas. And he doesn't want to tell his family. And he goes through a year of falling in love with his family, because he was a busy dad who spent too much time doing busy stuff. We did one a year or two ago that it was kind of a Miracle on 34th Street, or not a miracle. It's a Wonderful Life, but with a homeschool mom instead of George Bailey. And all those stories, and oftentimes ours, will point you not only to the manger, but they point you to what really matters. Because I sometimes think that we forget in the midst of it. Another one of those true life things that points us to what matters is, I think last week we prayed for Dorinda Wilson. And really the next day she went to heaven, the day before Thanksgiving. And, for her husband, for her 8 children, she has, I think, a dozen grandchildren, maybe. It's a weird place to be in right now. There's joy, there's pain, and a reminder of what really matters. And so you might be thinking, might be feeling kind of gloomy about whatever, not having enough to buy your kids the presents you want to buy them. Because I don't know about you, but when your kids get bigger, their gifts, their gift ideas become huger, and they give it to you without batting an eye. And of course we can't meet them all, but we want to. And you start to get gloomy and think, oh man, if I had more, I could. But you already have a whole bunch. So anyway, you can get our stories, The Family Man's Christmas Treasury. You can get it on our website, thesmilinghomeschooler.com. You can get them in PDFs. Ben oftentimes looks at them as PDFs. Yep. You can get them instantly just for a couple bucks a piece. You can get them as audios because they're in audio version as well, read by Jim Hodges, master storyteller. And so we have a lot of opportunities to tell good stories, families listening together. And it's kind of old-fashioned. It's kind of an old-fashioned thing. Instead of watching a movie, you listen to someone read a story.
But it just and I talked about it last week, I think, right before the episode. But me and my kids, we read these, before they go to bed, or in an evening, and they are really, really good. I like all of them, but personally, The Stranger, Cootie McKay, Nativity, and Catherine in the Snow Village is my three favorite, but they're all really good and the kids love them. We just read Captain Chaos a couple nights ago. So again, the digital download is super cheap. So you should definitely check them out.
And they're all about 15 minutes. They take about that long to read. They're not the super short, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas Went All Through the House, kind of thing with Jesus. But it's just a little bit longer where you can sit there on the couch and snuggle, make it part of your evening, not just a real quickie to get done.
Right.
So, but you can get them at our website today. But you ought to order them today because you're running out of time.
Yeah. So, but maybe I can introduce our main topic. You posted it over on Facebook, just kind of seeing what people's fears were. But this is something, I've been talking to my wife about. She shared a couple weeks ago. If you haven't listened to that episode, it's really, really good. I think it was 2 episodes ago, just sharing some of the hard things that she's working through, the struggles that she's been going through, and just a feeling of fear of, of loss, of relationships, of different things. And it's really, really, really tough emotion. I would say it's probably the strongest because it causes us to act, pretty easily, I think. But so I thought it would just be a good topic to talk about because, homeschooling parents, but just parents in general, fear is part of every person's life. Anyone who says they don't ever feel it, they're either psychologically, got something going on there, or they're lying, because I think everyone has some fears. And we asked our Facebook followers what some of those were, and I think that's maybe a good place to start. Just, fear of, like, one of the first ones, Wendy said, my biggest fear is that my children won't be born again. I think that's something that, any Christian parent would definitely sympathize with. Ashley said, it would used to be what would happen if my husband passed or me, but thankfully they've set up things for that. Their kids could be homeschooled even regardless. So I guess she's not afraid of that anymore. But and then Kelly said that I'm not prepared for my kids, or that I'm not preparing my kids well enough for their future. That's something we hear all the time, So I think there's just so many. You can, Dad, I don't know if any stood out to you.
Well, and they all kind of said the same thing, some of them said, fear that their kids would walk away from God, or they wouldn't be born again. And I was thinking, I kind of looked, because AI will tell you everything. And I was kind of asking, like, what are the different types of fears? And they had, all these kind of scientific, rational fear, primal fear, irrational fears. And I broke them down kind of into 3. And Ben, I think maybe, I think we're not going to talk about all 3, but I think we're going to talk about one of them. I put my categories as the fear of sharks, which includes, all the physical things. Like, I have this thing about sharks. I don't want to be, eaten by a shark. Bears, car wrecks, darkness, the water, going too fast, accidents, other things that are kind of outside that might kill you, because really those, God's given us kind of a gift of fear. So we don't just march up to a shark, and try to swim with it, and then there's I think the fear of failure, or the fear of me, really, and my inadequacies, where, and these are the ones I think I'd like to talk about, where we're afraid we're going to do it wrong. Our kids are going to walk away. When we compare, we feel inferior. We have a fear of being blamed, or of letting others down, or not being perfect and not making the right decisions. And then there's that kind of the fear of God. Really, when you look in the Bible, the vast number of times where fear is used, it's used of how we should view God. We're told, don't fear other things, but fear him. But that's not the one we're really going to talk about. I think it's that middle one that we should talk about, and the ones that really the ladies over at Facebook echoed. Those fears, the fear of my own inadequacies. And would you say that's kind of, what you've been thinking, Ben?
Yeah.
Those kind of fears?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think it comes back to, it really is a fear of that I'm not going to be accepted, whether it's from other people, but, for us, I think it's even from God, that we feel like we aren't going to be good enough to earn it. Like, it is a fear of not going to be good enough. And obviously there's those fears, like we said, towards your kids and all that. But, I was thinking about it, and in Genesis 3, literally you have the first words that it says that Adam says is the flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. But then right after that is the fall. And then right after that, the first words he says is, God's walking and he says, where are you? And then Adam says, I heard the sound of you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked. And he goes from there. So literally the first sentence almost outside of the flesh of my flesh, it talks about he's being afraid, and it's afraid of that he is a failure and that he can't, that he messed up, which is, is true. But then obviously God then gives us an entire Bible of showing that he is the one that we're going to be able to rely on and all of that. So yeah, I think there's a fear of failure across the board. I think there's just a fear of losing relationships and friends. It's especially our kids. I mean, our kids are the most important thing outside, our spouses, and you just don't want to mess that up, and I think a lot of it comes from taking that weight and putting it all on our shoulders, feeling like we have to be the ones to do it all, that, that we're to blame for everything that goes wrong there, and whether that's right or wrong.
And do you think, I think I would say, Ben, it is wrong. Yeah. It's wrong because in a sense, and I feel this word is misused when we say it's because of pride. It's not a pride where we go, I am so good that I can do everything. But it's almost a pride in the other way that says, I'm so bad, so it must be my fault.
Right.
Or that somehow it's because of me, And I think in a lot of those things, where we take all the responsibility of our children's future and we put it on us. Not because it's some like spin the wheel and go, hey, whatever happens, happens. Because I don't feel that way.
Right.
I
mean, we are called, and there's definitely, obviously we are held responsible as parents to an extent, but,
obviously.
Yeah.
But even that, our extent, because we are given those things, you train up your child in the way it should go, and you don't have to worry about, them walking away, knowing that God made lots of promises that what he began not only in you, but really in your children, he will complete it, and I can trust him in those things because, and there was there's a verse that says in 1 John 4:18, it says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. And I just thought, if there's no fear in love, I mean, if fear doesn't live in love, where does fear live? Does it live in that sense of self-reliance or sin? That's when Adam noticed it. He noticed he was afraid when all of a sudden he blew it, or maybe it is in that pride, or maybe it's in something else. But it really, the instruction or the encouragement is you don't have to be afraid because you're loved. You're loved by God. And maybe let's stop right there, Ben.
Yeah.
Before you take that any further, why don't we do a little commercial?
Yeah, well, real quick, we just wanted to thank Teaching Textbooks, as always, for making what we do possible. They're just an amazing curriculum. And whether you use them or haven't or checked them out before or haven't, you can do that over at teachingtextbooks.com. But maybe reach out to them and just tell them you appreciate their support of the Smiling Homeschooler. They're an amazing company, and we love partnering with them because we believe in what they do, and they believe in what we do. And they want homeschoolers to smile during a time, which is math, that a lot of people don't. So go check them out over at teachingtextbooks.com.
We also want to thank Samaritan Ministries and Redeem Healthshare Ministry for being part of today's show. Imagine joining a community of Christians where everyone's got your back when it comes to healthcare. That's what it's like with Redeem. When you become a member, you're not just another name on a list. You're part of a close-knit community that's all about caring for each other. We share more than just health share costs. We share our lives, our faith, and our journeys. As members of Redeem, you're never alone. So click on the link in the show notes to learn more.
Yeah.
Okay, you were going to say that.
I was just going to say, because, it's so natural. It's so integral to us. And I think it's the fear of we all have sinned and we have all felt the effects of that. So, we don't have perfect love for everyone, or we've not been perfectly loved, and I don't love perfectly all the time. So, we don't want to go through that hurt, and we feel those things. And that's true. I mean, God has a better thing planned for us someday because of all of those things. But, I think the hope comes back to knowing that we are loved unconditionally. If you are a born again believer through Christ, he does love us, and we don't have to earn that. And that is so hard to believe and so hard to trust. But I think leaning on those, the promises that God has given us through the Bible is really the only key, because it is just so hard. Because otherwise, you go, I'm just going to be bold. I'm going to do all these things. But, you're going to have doubt. You're going to have, we're all going to have, times where we just don't believe, or we don't feel that boldness. We feel like I'm just screwing up my kids and I know they're ruined, and in that moment, you can't just be like, I'm just going to be even more unafraid. Like, you have to lean on something bigger than yourself, I think.
But don't you think that's kind of just knowing the truth? I mean, reminding yourself of the truth.
100%.
Because fear doesn't change the outcome. Fear doesn't make it scary. I mean, there's this game that we played, I don't know if you've ever played it actually, where you have two people and they stand there and they blindfold a third person in the middle and they have him stand on a board. Have you played this game?
I've done it.
And you hold it like 2 inches off the ground. And then as they're holding it, the people on either side of him, they put their hands on their shoulders. The other people lower themselves down. So it feels like they're being picked up off the ground. And, and you're getting higher and higher because the people are really scrunched down. And the guy in the middle thinks, I'm going to hit the ceiling. I must be 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And then they say, you're going to hit the ceiling. Jump, jump, jump. And he's so afraid. The truth is, he's 1 inch off the ground, and I think if you could remind yourself of the truth, you could win that game every time. If you just said, hey, I know I'm only 1 inch off the ground and you're just, doing that. And I think sometimes, like you said, I don't have to be afraid of sharks. I don't have to be afraid of those outside things. I don't have to be afraid of the insides, because I know God's in control of all things, of the circumstances, and I know he only does what is good, holy, and best. And I know he loves me, and I think sometimes we forget that he really, really loves us. And so I know even when I was in seminary and guys they'd struggle over, well, this terrible thing happened, to this guy in a car wreck. And, and they struggled in saying, is God going to, and I'm like, here's what I know. I know God loves me and that guy in the car wreck a ton, way more than I can ever imagine. Is it possible that a loving God could do something that I can't understand? And the answer is yes. And I'm not saying I'm not solving all those little problems right now, or even some of the big ones, but I am saying the truth is you are loved. And God loves your children so much. You don't have to be afraid of your kids being born again. I'm going to tell you that they will come to know Christ because you love Christ and you love them. And God said, you and your household. He says, at other times that, that he will bless them upon generation after generation. And so I don't fear that. I know sometimes my wife does, and I'm there. She'll like, well, what if our kids walk away? And I'm like, they're not going to, honey. And I don't believe that just because I've given them such a good example to follow. I just have seen God work in their lives. I know God's faithful. That's what we've asked for. Why would I not believe anything else?
But I will say not every mom is in that situation where their kid is actively walking away. And at that point, you can't just be like, I mean, you could, I guess, but that is not on your hands, and God can bring them back, and you just keep being faithful. But I do also think, like, based on that, is fear does lie. So, we have these fears that we feel so strongly, and and I, especially like with what Riss has been talking about recently and what we've been going through, is it's hard to just be like, just say the truth and, I'll be good now. It just feels so overwhelmingly true that, I do think you need someone alongside you, or you might need, or going to your Bible constantly. You need that influx of truth constantly, because the fear does feel so true, even though it is
totally
often lying.
And I think that's why we do need each other. I think that's why.
Yeah.
Wives need husbands and husbands need wives, because there are times when I start to get wishy-washy and I start to think that it's all going to collapse. I mean, even we were talking today, when Ben and Riss were over at our house, And Ben was talking about somebody who, made a lot of money and how easy that would be. And Rissa said, but we're happy, but we're happy. We're happier than they are, or something like that, and that's the truth. That's the truth. And I just think we need each other to remind each other of the truth. I mentioned it before, Ben said Grammy and Granddad, that's my parents. They're in a memory care unit right now. And my mom, every day in our whole life, she used to say, this is the day the Lord has made, and she's not too sure anymore, and she's a little worried. She believes it, but she needs to be reminded. She needs me to remind her. And I think, in this, I think even homeschooling moms, we can't go it alone. We cannot go it alone. And I hope that you come to the Smiling Homeschooler to remind you of those truths. There was a mom who said, I worry about the high school years. Will my kids be prepared? I'm going to tell you, your kids will be prepared. I don't know all the circumstances. I don't know, what they're going to do, but I know that they will be prepared because you care and because God's bigger than you. And he knew more than you do. And so he knew your kids needed you. And so he gave them to you. And if that didn't prepare them, then it's God's fault.
And I think one practical thing you can do, and this has been huge for us, this is something, again, referring back to this episode a couple of weeks ago, Rissa did that, shared that. That's tough, because part of that fear is, well, I don't want to share that I'm really struggling or I have these fears because people are going to judge me or I'm going to look weak or I'm going to, everyone else doesn't have these. I'm just going to keep this fear to myself. But people, true friends, people who love you will come alongside you and just saying, hey, can you pray for me? I'm really struggling with feeling like a fear of failure right now as, towards my family or fear that I'm not good enough or that I'm not loved or whatever it may be. And I think that does take some going out of your comfort zone sometimes, but I think it's so important to be willing to be open. And if you do that, I really believe that other people will reciprocate really quickly because they want that too. But everyone just has this desire to fake it, and act like they're not the ones who are also feeling that those struggles and those doubts. And it's not true, and I think as we were saying, like, we think it's all on us. I mean, literally, that is why the fall happens. Like right before Adam says that, they just were thinking, well, I can be all of that on my own. I can have the wisdom and I can have all that. And that lie is what led to that. So, it is a lie that you can do it all on your own and that you're going to, have perfect kids if I do all of these things and I go through all of the, have them learn all these languages and they're doing all these credits and all that. Like, that's just not what it's all about and what it all comes from and where all success is going to reside. So I really think
I think we've kind of created that ourselves.
Yeah.
With it really as a Christian within the church, that we've made it sound like we've all got our lives under control. And if we admit that we're struggling, then something's wrong with us. There is something wrong with us. We do. That's why we need each other. That's why we need God. I mean, really, I've heard so many parents just barely admit that their kid doesn't like to do school. I'm like, who does? The ones who do, those are the ones you should watch. Never turn your back on them. But that's normal. And even the stuff that Rissa shared a couple weeks ago, honestly, that's normal too. Lots of people have gone through some really hard times. You're not alone, and God's big enough to handle it all.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid. I thought what Rissa said was so good when she said, I just haven't been able to do much school. Teaching textbook has been our, savior. And man, what a great thing to know that your kids are going to get an awesome education, even if you couldn't do much during this period of time. And that's okay, because again, God fills in all those blanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a big one, I mean, I think this is a lot revolves around it. And I think it's so important, and I think that is why what we do, and just being encouraging to those around you, looking for opportunities to just encourage the other moms that in your life is just so important, because you never know. I mean, really, since most people don't really share that stuff, it's hard to know who else out there is really going through a hard time. So I think it's always good to
But
be
I will tell
extra
you,
aware.
even if you don't know, Mom, do not believe the lie that you're the only one facing what you're facing. You have to tell yourself the truth that this is everybody. I mean, I have just heard so many people come up to me after I've spoken somewhere and said, yeah, but I know this one person who really does seem like they have it all together. And I'm like, you're wrong. They don't, And so, and that's normal, and that's okay. But I think, Ben, I think this is a great topic, to just talk about, and I think other people feel the same way. And again, the truth is God's in control of everything. He only does what is good, holy, and best. And God loves you, and he loves your children, so he's got to get them where they need to be. And you can kind of rest in that. You don't have to be afraid. Well, that's a good place to stop. Again, don't keep playing for the Dorinda Wilson family. And just as a little clarification, Dorinda is not related to me in any way. I've had several of you say, praying for your family. And I sure appreciate your prayers for my family. And God's not like, oh, well, they're praying for his family. I mean, he's got this. He knows that. But she is just a friend of our family. She will be missed. But her husband and her children and her grandchildren still need your prayers. So have a great week. Don't stress out. I know we're going to run out of time here, and Christmas is coming faster than you can probably imagine. This would be probably one of those times where you want to do your Home Alone scream right now and pass out backwards, and I get it, so you can do that. But I hope you take advantage of all these special open window opportunities. Maybe check out our Christmas Treasury book. Get it. I'll get it to you right away. And I think it'll make all of you smile.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Again, thank you to Teaching Textbooks for making this all possible, and also to Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians that pay one another's medical bills, helping families take a safe step of faith as they feel God's leading career or ministry changes or in bringing mom home. And you can learn more over at SamaritanMinistries.org, and you can use the specific link in the Facebook chat there. So appreciate everyone being here. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and don't forget to smile.